Hi, this is the Magnificent Midlife podcast, and I'm Rachel Lancaster. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started, and the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about issues that matter, and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now is our time. Today I'm dipping into the podcast archives again to share another gem with you. Today it's Sam Walker, who is host of the very fabulous Sam Walker's Desert Diaries podcast, which she started to document her move from Manchester, UK to Phoenix, Arizona. That podcast, since we recorded this podcast that you're going to listen to, won 3 British Podcast Awards and has continued to be a phenomenally successful podcast. She is a master storyteller, an award-winning radio and TV broadcaster. She has multiple podcasts under her belt. And now her most recent challenge is that she is currently training for a marathon, the London Marathon, no less. So good luck to you, Sam. And I hope that everybody here will enjoy my conversation with Sam Walker.
Sam, it is so wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much for joining me.
It is my pleasure. Really lovely to talk to you, Rachel.
We connected over Twitter. It seems to happen all the time to me, but it was a wonderful connection to make. So I've been listening to your podcast. I binged on it. I'm all the way up to date, you will be pleased to know. My goodness me. So first of all, I'd love to know, why on earth did you decide to move from Manchester to Phoenix, Arizona?
Goodness me. It seems 1,000 years ago that I did that. And also 5 minutes. It has been, as you know from listening to the podcast, well done, actually. If you've binged that, that's quite a lot. It took me a year to get through some of those huge traumas and massive joyful experiences. To listen to it in all one go, I think you probably needed to lie down.
But I wasn't quite all in one go. Hey, it wasn't quite, but not far off.
I've had people who've done it in a day, and I've said, "Gosh, you need therapy now, blimey." But really, I think it's something I felt the itch to do my whole life. So my whole life, I just had that feeling of what's happening over there. And it wasn't kind of the FOMO, as the youth say today, the fear of missing out. It was more a feeling that I just wanted to explore. And I think you have that itch or you don't. And if you don't have it, you'll be like, what? And if you do, you'll be like, yes. And whenever I would go away on holiday, I'd just be desperate not to go home. And it wasn't just because I was on an all-inclusive in, Magaluf thinking, oh, this is great. I mean, who wouldn't want to do that? But you know what I mean? It was that sense of just wanting to explore and see what's around the next corner and meet new people and just learn about the world, really. And I always felt that way. And I did all the things, quote, you're supposed to do. And I got a job, and I worked so hard to get a job at the BBC and get on a staff, contract, which is so incredibly hard. And I had the huge ambition of getting onto national radio, which I was so lucky to do. And it just sounds awful when I say this out loud. I'm embarrassed to say it. But I woke up one morning about 4 or 5 years ago, and I said in my head, I've got to interview Meatloaf and Sean Connery today. No, sorry, I've got to interview Meatloaf and Roger Moore today. And then I actually heard myself say that and went, okay, this is a big problem. This is a big problem. You are so lucky to have this job. You are so privileged to be in this position. And you're not excited. Because I started out on a teeny tiny little radio station in southwest London. I didn't start till I was 30. I wasn't in radio from the day dot. It was something I dreamed of doing, didn't have the confidence to do, didn't think I was good enough, always put it off. And then, very long story short, found myself in front of a microphone age 30. So it was a dream that I'd had that I never fulfilled. And then it was only like a sort of 10 or so years later that I found myself uttering those ridiculous words. And I thought, man alive, what is wrong with you? Why aren't you excited? Why aren't you full of joy at the thought of doing this? And of course, once I interviewed them, it was wonderful and I loved it. But I thought the fact it started to feel like a bit of a slog. And as I said, I'm embarrassed to say that because it sounds stupid. But I think it was getting in the car and going to the same place every day. That was the thing. It was getting in a car, driving the same drive to the same studio. And even though I loved what happened when I was in the studio, it was the whole process. And I just felt, where's life going? Where is my life going? I'm doing the same thing every day. And I had a lovely house and I had wonderful neighbors and great friends. And I just had this voice going, there's something more out there. There's something more. There's something more. And I really wanted that voice to go away. I really did. I was like, give me a break. I should be so happy with everything I've got. Oh, and then every time we'd go away as a family, my husband was like, I don't want to go back. Why don't we just keep driving? We'd always have that, let's just keep driving conversation. And in the end, I just thought, you know what? We're either going to do this or we're not. And we're either going to be 70 years old if we're lucky enough to be here at 70 and saying, why didn't we ever do that? Or we're just going to do it. And what's the worst that can happen? Well, let's find out. And so we'd looked at various places in the States. We'd spent some time in New York, which I loved, but we don't have $4 million to buy an apartment. So sadly off the list. We'd been around California, which we loved. And then a friend of mine who'd moved from London to Phoenix many years ago drove out to see us when we were spending some time in San Diego. On a house swap. House swap websites are great. You can go on free holidays. You've got to come up with the airfare, but free holiday. Oh, it's just wonderful. But anyway, so we did a lot of house swapping, and he drove out and just said, oh, I've moved to this city. It's in the middle of the desert. There are mountains everywhere. There's cacti. There's breathtaking sunsets. There's a heat that feels like you're, opening an oven door. It's this kind of crazy, mystical, wonderful place with this amazing light every morning and every evening. And my husband was like, desert, cacti, mountains, let's do it. And so it wasn't till the next year that we came to stay with Ian, my friend, and we were standing in his pool and we'd been there about a day and we were looking at the mountains and looking at a cacti and feeling the heat on our faces. And my husband just went, this is it, let's do it. And that was the start of a completely wild journey, which took a year till we actually made it here. But even that year in itself was crazy. And I think anyone who's ever made a major decision about changing their lives, whether it's leaving a marriage or starting a marriage or moving to another city or another country, you'll know how your mood and we have this kind of, I think, crazy notion as humans to keep ourselves safe. This kind of instinct kicks in. So every time you go, oh, I think let's just give up our jobs, our lives, our friends, our families and move to the other side of the world. It's like, what? No, don't do that. So that kind of survival instinct, I think, goes into overdrive. So it's a tough thing to do, but here we are. Here we are. I still can't quite believe it, genuinely.
Well, I don't think you're alone in getting those feelings in midlife, particularly. Yours perhaps was a little bit early, but there's so many women that I encounter that have those feelings, but then you actually acted on it. I mean, I think that is the massive thing. And you weren't alone. You couldn't take that decision just for yourself. It was for your whole family. So how did you push through the fear that I know you felt when you were sort of starting that whole process, and then the whole adjustment that you've been through since?
I definitely struggled. I mean, I'm very lucky in that my husband felt the same way. I cannot imagine. Actually, I do have a friend who made a similar move, a man who made a similar move, and he said it took him 3 years to convince his wife because she wasn't keen on doing it. And it was, I mean, it sounds like he strong-armed her. He didn't, but, they're very happy living where they live now. But I think I know that my husband Dave, is quite a lot younger than me. He's like 7 years younger than me. And I don't think he felt that sense of adventure, but I didn't think he felt the urgency that I felt. And he was definitely more cautious, and he was more, what can go wrong, even though it was him who eventually led the charge by applying for this job in a swimming pool on his phone. I mean, literally just Googled his job. He works in tech, applied for this job, and we went, ha, that's ridiculous. And then, of course, they phoned 2 weeks later and we went, what? But I think that clearly really helped that he was also there. I felt so much fear. I can't tell you. I was genuinely terrified. I was actually shaking when I was writing my letter of resignation to my job. I'd worked so hard to get that job. I'd worked crazy 80-hour weeks and working nights and working weekends. And I just was thinking, what am I doing? And then I suppose little signs from the universe came in. And I was in a taxi one night thinking, I can't do this. I was coming back from my friend's house. I was thinking, I just don't want to go. I can't leave her. What if I never make a friend like that in America? I'm crazy to do this. And I was chatting to a taxi driver and he said, oh, so how are you? And I said, oh, I've just been to a friend's. I said, oh, I'm maybe leaving and I'm just feeling really nervous about it. He said, oh, where do you think you might go? And I was like, oh, I'm moving to the States. And he was like, oh, that's amazing. That's amazing. And he said, just don't forget, the brave might not live forever, but the timid never live at all. And I was like, whoa, I really needed that from this kind of random taxi driver in Manchester in, 6 months before we were leaving here. So little things like that would happen where I'd just think, oh, I can't do it. And then I was thinking about the children. We lived in an area where there was grammar schools. My daughter got into the grammar school. I was thinking the education, I'm robbing her from an education. What are we doing? And then I was listening to something on the radio and they were talking about the change that the world is currently experiencing and how we literally can't predict the future. We don't know what the future holds for us. And they said, the jobs that your children have probably haven't even been invented yet. That's the thing, because the world's changing so rapidly. And they said, the one thing you can do to prepare your children for the future is teach them not to be afraid of change and to teach them to embrace change and not be afraid of adapting their lives. And I thought, there you go again. It was like this little sort of neon sign going, just do it, just do it, just do it. And if we look, Rachel, at the last 6 months, who could have predicted that? I mean, this is the thing. The times I've torn myself to shreds when really horrible, hard things have happened here in Arizona. And there has been those moments I've thought, what if we hadn't left? This wouldn't have happened. Never would someone say, well, right, it's going to be a global pandemic. No one can leave the house. We can't see our friends even if they live around the corner. One of my best friends in Manchester said to me, I'm really glad you're in Arizona because I think if you were around the corner and I couldn't see you, it would feel worse. So this is the thing. All the things that I feared and all the things that I was terrified might happen, none of those things happened. Not a single one of them. Lots of other really horrible things happened. But we can't predict the future. So why not take a chance on being happy and doing the thing that makes you feel joy, whatever that might be? You don't have to move to the desert. You can start a pottery class, whatever it might be.
But I think it's often it's that fear of it going wrong that stops us, isn't it? And I think we can often get into those sort of rigid ideas that this is the way it's going to be. And then if it doesn't work, then what? But I'm always saying we can always pivot. Exactly. We can always change and do another way. If that doesn't work, we can just pivot a bit and we'll be fine. And most of the time we can find solutions. And I think the lovely thing about your podcast is you're always finding solutions because the shit is always hitting the fucking fan, is it not?
That's so true.
Excuse my French, but it really is.
It's 100%. And it's amazing the solutions you didn't know you had in you, if you see what I mean. Because I never imagined I would move into a house and find a scorpion in my kitchen sink. I'm used to finding, cornflake bowls crusted up and thinking, children, load the dishwasher. But I never imagined that. I never imagined finding a snake in my backyard. I never imagined a rogue landlord threatening to come and shoot me, which is one of the most hideous experiences of my life, which happened just a couple of months ago. But you go into this different zone where you just go, okay, I'm just going to sort it out. And you do. And all of those things that happened, I never imagined any of those things happening. And all the things I worried about, none of those things did happen. So you're right. We're resourceful. We're women. Do you know, we get through our whole lives. We are constantly having to assess the situation we're in and deal with it. So I know it's a cliche, I know it's a fridge magnet, but you are stronger than you think you are. You really are.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I've moved to the US as well, and that was another of the things that I just loved about hearing your experiences with, whether it be with the medical system or just getting to America and having no credit history, which is actually worse than having bad credit history.
100%. You're a ghost. You don't exist. Yeah.
So tell me about some of the frustrating things that you just simply hadn't expected.
I knew the credit thing would be an issue because I'd done some research and I found out that, yes, you're right, you have no credit history. So it's like being 17 years old when you kind of get your first bank card or whatever it might be, and you get your first, in my days, checkbook and all the rest of it. And you get a credit card and it's got like a £50 limit or whatever it might be. And it's all an adventure because guess what? You're probably still living with mum and dad and you don't have the responsibilities of someone in their mid to late 40s with 2 children who need a car, and they can't buy a £200 banger and do it up because you've got your children and your dog and you've got everything that comes with being a grown up. But what really surprised me was not being able to get a bank account. And that was frustrating because my husband got his first paycheck. We'd been here a couple of days and they gave us sort of a bit of seed money, which was great because he got a relocation package thing. And we went to the bank and said, can we open a bank account, please? And they said, yeah, of course. And we said, look, we want to put this money in it. Great. No problem. Can we see your driving license? Yeah, here you go. Here's my driving license. What's that? Well, it's a driving license. I've had it for 100 years because I was, I passed my test at 17. Oh, no, we don't know what that is. Well, it's a British driving license. Oh, no, you need an Arizona driving license. Okay, we haven't got one of those yet because to get a driving license, you need to give them a bank statement to prove that you've got a bank. Oh, well, no, you need a driving license to get your bank. Okay, well, is there anything else you can do? Oh, a utility bill. We've just got here, so our furniture's still in a container on the Atlantic. So can we give you our Airbnb? Would you pay the gas bill in there? No. Well, that's no good then. So we then thought, well, we'll try and get the driving license. Went to the driving license. They also needed a utility bill. And you just find yourself in this crazy vicious cycle where company A needs company B in order to validate who you are. So we were these ghosts who didn't exist, had no credit history, couldn't buy anything. My mum was like, well, I'll lend you the money. Go and buy a car. I said, but that's not the point. That's not going to actually help us because we will then still have no credit history unless we get some credit on something. So it was really tough, really frustrating. For the record, and the short version is Wells Fargo. Hello, we'll give you a bank account if anyone's moving to America. You don't need to have a utility bill from an American address for that. It was just such a learning process. It was, but very intense because all the time you're thinking, I kind of want to make this as easy as possible for my children. And I don't want them they've been, hugely disrupted by moving them, although they were dead excited. So it was emotional. And then trying to get a dentist, man alive, right? Gee, I mean, seriously, you would think, having spent my whole life in England pretty much up until this point, you move house, you find a dentist. It can be tricky because NHS dentists are hard to come by sometimes, especially in cities. You go to the dentist, you maybe pay a bit of money depending on what you're having done, but 20 quid or something? Children are free. You go home again. The end. Oh no. Oh no. As you know, it's right. It's so complicated. We'd need to sit down. I'd need to draw a pie chart on the wall behind me with various. It's crazy. There are in-network dentists. There are out-of-network dentists, which is the insurance company that you have will only work with certain dentists. Those certain dentists they work with are in-network in inverted commas if they're at their office. But if you need to go to hospital, they're not in network anymore, which means you need to find a different dentist to do that work there. I was so naive. I thought if you were paying hundreds of dollars a month for your insurance, which is equaled by my husband's company. So we're lucky he gets it through his company. So we pay a big chunk, but they pay a chunk. I thought that meant it was free. I didn't think that you then had to pay hundreds of dollars. So I was like, they were like, that's going to be $1,500, please. And I went, but we've got insurance. So like, oh yeah, you've got really good insurance. This is the people at the glasses. I wear glasses and lenses. My daughter wears glasses and lenses. And they said $1,500. And I went, but I've got insurance. Yeah, you've got great insurance. So that's brought it right down to $1,500. And I was like, what do you mean it's brought it right down? Please come back, Specsavers, please. So it's been, I wanted a challenge. I wanted a learning curve. Boy, did I get one. Absolutely.
There's nothing like moving to America to make you so appreciative of the NHS. I mean, I'm forever telling people around the world how wonderful it is. And American friends cannot believe that, we have all this for, well, it's not free, but technically it's free. It's included.
But it's funny. A lot of people I've spoken to here are like, oh, we don't want your socialist ways. You're socialists in... Yeah,
I heard you say that on the podcast. Yeah. It's just crazy, isn't it?
They see it as socialism, and Donald Trump or Republican senators will tweet, The Democrats want to steal your money. They want to steal your money and make you pay for poor people's healthcare. You pay for your family right now. Why would you pay for those poor people? And when I've had conversations with people about it, I said, well, do you know what? You're right. Your taxes, if you are taxed at source, will pay for everyone else. But that's helping people less fortunate than you. Right now, you are paying much more than you will ever pay if it's paid at source. And right now, you're just lining the pockets of billionaire insurance companies. But you're cool with that. It's strange. Some people, not everyone, of course, but some people here in Arizona feel comfortable with lining the pockets of billionaire insurance companies, but do not want any of their money to go to poorer people because, well, they should have worked harder. And that's a really reductive thing to say, but I have had those conversations. I just don't understand.
That really is the cultural divide. It's where we speak the same language, but we are so far apart. So what have been the best bits about your move? What have you really loved?
So much. Just so much. I mean, I've talked about all the challenges and the hard stuff and terrible things that have happened, but even yesterday, I was driving to IKEA, rock and roll. That's the kind of girl I am. And I was driving down a road called the 51, which goes through the center of Phoenix, getting on at the brilliantly named Thunderbird Road. And I jumped on the 51. I was driving with my daughters because we've moved house. We've got no bookshelves in this house and we've got a load of books in the garage. And just driving down the 51, it's surrounded by mountains. It literally cuts through all the mountain preserves in Phoenix. And I would just have this overwhelming moment of, I'm in America, where I live, looking at the mountains, driving down a freeway. And I just had this surge of complete joy. And again, my dream of doing this, most people listening will probably just think, what? Why does that make you happy? What? Because everyone's dream is different, right? And what brings us joy is different. You know, I've got friends who are just really into sport, and for them, running a marathon brings them incredible joy. I don't get that. It just hurts me. And other people love music. I mean, I love music. So listening to music and going to live gigs, that would bring me joy. Other people are like, meh, what? So it's such a personal thing, but just those little moments, being in stores sometimes and just seeing something like, you know, grape jelly. And I remember as a child coming to America, it's the only holiday we ever came on because Freddie Laker released these very cheap airline tickets when I was a kid. And we went to Devon a couple of times to see my uncle. That was our general summer holiday. And then my dad was like, look, we've got these cheap tickets. And he drove to Birmingham to the agency, the travel agents, to get these cheap tickets to America. And, you know, normal people like our family could suddenly go to America. And I remember sitting in like Denny's diners having grape jelly and just it feeling so magical and feeling so exciting. And it was like something off the telly. And I still get that kick when I see, you know, Schmucker's grape jelly. And I just think, it's just, I think the sense of having a dream of doing something, it being really, really, really hard to do it, but then doing it. And you go, wow, I did that. I've done it. And that joy doesn't go away, even when bad things happen. There's still that wonderful, visceral joy you get. And I look out the window now and I see mountains and the sunshine and I'm just excited. And, you know, I was in my swimming pool before I came to talk to you, Rachel. How insane is that? I woke up this morning, put a coffee on, did some work, early doors. My husband had taken the dog out. He came back and we got in the swimming pool. I'm like, I am so lucky. This is the dream. It's the dream. So I'm really mindful of really noticing the little things and just feeling so grateful for those little things, whether it's grape jelly or swimming pools. It's just ace.
I love a Denny's diner. You've reminded me just talking about that and the Schmucker's grape jelly. I was like, yeah, bring it on. I love all
but
of
it's
that.
just still exciting. It's so cheap, and it's just exciting
It's
to
cheap.
be there. Definitely.
Yeah. Oh wow! And the landscapes. I mean, you've been on some fantastic trips and road trips, and you describe the landscapes. And when you talked about the Grand Canyon, I've been to the Grand Canyon. I've driven round the Grand Canyon, so I really feel this when you're talking about it because it is so utterly spectacular, isn't it? And there is nothing really here. I mean, there's the
Beautiful,
Highlands
yeah.
of Scotland, maybe that could sort of compare slightly. But the scale of it all.
It's the Arizona skies, I think, which are just unbelievable. And, you know, my dad lived in Africa for a while. My parents split up when I was in my early 20s. And my mum went to Australia on holiday and never came back. That's why they split up. And my dad, a couple of years later, decided to go off and teach children in Africa. You can see where I got it from, right? And I'm an only child. And going to visit him in Tanzania was the first time I saw these kind of massive, wide open skies that just, I don't know, they do something to you as a human. You sit here and you realize your insignificance, but then you feel really connected to the world around you as well. And it's really wonderful. And I felt that in Arizona. And, you know, here in Phoenix, you can drive out 20 minutes and there's nothing else around. And there's just mountains and the animals and the birds and the huge saguaro cacti, and it's completely breathtaking. And there's a place near here called Sedona, which is very famous for having kind of $1 zillion retreats, but also normal price retreats as well. But I think a lot of very famous people have gone there over the years to kind of, I don't know, spin some crystals and be at one with nature, which sounds like I'm being sarcastic about it. So I think it's really beautiful, actually. It's an amazing, amazing place. But, you know, there is just completely and utterly breathtaking. And you can be there so quickly, but it's just the whole history around here. You know, I drive south through to Tombstone, to a place called Bisbee, and just these wide open plains, and you just can't help but, when you're driving along those pin straight roads, think of the kind of the pioneers who just came across here in their carts, and they just would have met the native people who were like, what the heck is going on? Who are you? Where have you come from? But you can imagine just coming around a corner and just seeing these landscapes and what that must have been like for those pioneers and those early settlers. And it's just a place that's so steeped in history that it just, as you can tell, I love it. It's incredible.
Well, I think that's also what's so wonderful is you clearly do love it so much. You know, there's great passion and joy in your voice. Like that's, you know, it's palpable. And that's what we all want from life, isn't it, really? To have that sense of enthusiasm. And it's so easy to just settle with what we have, whereas what you've done, and you've settled, you didn't settle for something, as you said at the beginning, that many people would have thought, wow, that's amazing, you know, but there was something else that was niggling away. There was that feeling, wasn't there, that was just, there's
Totally.
more.
Yeah, and I think it's, number one, it's not a competition. And I think whatever brings you joy is completely personal to you. This is what makes me really happy, exploring, getting out on a road, seeing different things, meeting different people. I'm just, other people, genuinely, it might be taking a walk in a garden. It might be caring for an animal. You know, it might be, I mean, I know someone who really loves guinea pigs. It sounds so silly, but she was like, I'm going to go and get some guinea pigs because I've always wanted some guinea pigs and I never had them. And that's made her dead happy. And I think, because I get so many messages and I thought, I love that. You don't need to throw your whole life in the air and move to another country. Get some guinea pigs. It's as valid. Anything in our life that gives us joy. And I think we're so conditioned, especially in Western society, that this is what your life should look like and this is what success should look like. And you need to get married and you need to buy a house and you need to get a good job and you need to not spend too much money because you've got to save up for your pension and save up for that and be sensible with your money. And just, this is what success is. Now, number one, that might absolutely suit some people, 100% down to the ground. Good. A lot of people, it doesn't. And you feel that struggle and you feel the guilt of, I should be happy. And I think I had some therapy for a couple of years because I was really struggling with, why aren't I happy with my life? What's wrong with me? And I remember him saying to me, the word should, as soon as you hear that coming into your head, kick it out, because we shouldn't do anything. You know, when you say, I should be happy, no, there's no rule book. It doesn't mean you should do that. Absolutely not. And that's something now when I ever hear any kind of voices coming in my head, I thought, oh, is that a should? Yeah, I'm not going to listen to that because there is no rule book at all. And I was really affected by a speech by Jim Carrey, you know, the actor, when he was getting an honorary doctorate from a university. And he talks about his father, who'd always wanted to be a comedian. And it was his big dream, but he didn't do it because he thought, well, I can't really be a comedian because, you know, I've got a young family and it's not very stable for them for me to be a comedian. So he went and became an accountant. And he studied hard for his accountancy exams. And he always has that dream of being on the stage. We thought it's not sensible. It's not the sensible thing to do. The sensible thing to do is to provide for your family and be an accountant. And he got to 40 and he was sacked like that. And you'll know that in the States, there isn't a great redundancy package offered. There's nothing for a lot of people. And he found himself age 40 with nothing because he'd worked really hard, but he hadn't earned a huge amount of money. And he thought, oh no, I've failed at doing something I didn't want to do because I thought that's what I should do. And Jim Carrey said, so why not try and do the thing you love? Because if you fail, at least you failed at trying to do something you love, because you can equally fail at doing something you don't want to do. And I think that's a really important message that, you know, we do have only one life. And I'm definitely someone who thinks a lot about death, and absolutely not in a maudlin way. I'm not sitting here thinking, oh, we're all going to die. What's the point of it all? I think, blimey, we have got one life. And I think we forget that as well. And we put off till tomorrow because great. What if tomorrow doesn't come? And again, I'm not someone who's fearful and thinking, oh no, I can't cross the road. A bus might come. It's more, just do it now, because you might not be lucky enough to be around for 60. You might not be. So don't put it off. Do it. And you know, a lot of people will say, well, that's not sensible. But hey ho, I've never really been the sensible one, I don't think.
But COVID has made that even more apparent, hasn't it? I think, you know, certainly it's I've always thought that midlife, if you haven't, you know, followed your dreams yet, midlife is really the time to start doing that. And COVID for me is kind of, you know, put that on steroids, that feeling. But, you know, what's it like for you where you are?
I think it's at times felt completely overwhelming. It's definitely shown me more of the cultural divide between the US and the UK. Not being able to see my father, who's in the UK, because I can't fly to the States and he can't fly here. I nearly came to the UK in March. I had some work on and I'd actually checked into my flight, and it was before lockdown happened. But Trump started making noises about, oh, if you're in Europe, he's not going to let you fly back. And because I'm not a permanent resident here, I'm on a 3-year visa, I thought, if I go to England and he shuts the borders, I can't get back in. So I checked into the flight, as I said, and then I said to my dad, I'm sorry, I'm not coming. And as it was, the next day, President Trump closed the border. So I would still be in England without my children, which would be really challenging. So that's very hard for me. My mum is very, very sick and is in Western Australia. I can't get to her because the Australian borders are shut. I genuinely wonder if I'm ever going to see my parents again, because they're both older. And as I said, my mum particularly is really, really sick. She's got terminal lung cancer, and that's hugely challenging. And if I was in the same country as them, which I wouldn't have been if I'd stayed in England, I mean, I'd be with my dad, but I wouldn't be with my mum anyway, because she's lived in Australia for 25 years. So that I struggle with, and I just have to call them, FaceTime them, WhatsApp them, Zoom them, all the things we're so lucky that we can do now because technology is there. That's what I can just do, and try and make those memories and share that time with them remotely. I think there was definitely, when lockdown first happened here in Arizona, and there were huge marches and protests from people saying this is against their freedoms as Americans, that really started to open up that cultural divide for me. Absolutely. I mean, there was 500 people at the march in Phoenix. There's like 5 million people here. So as you can see, it's not a huge, it's not representative of society here in Arizona. But there are people who are very vocal, who were there with their guns saying, you know, you cannot tell me to stay inside. Only God can tell me to stay inside. You cannot. And so that was like, why wouldn't you just stay in to protect other people? It just seems very selfish to me. But each to their own. That's the whole point of this society. There is freedom. So that was going on. Masks are now mandated, and every day there are videos of people who are refusing to wear masks in public because, yeah, you can't tell me what to do. It's freedom. But that was going on. There was the horrific murder of George Floyd, which took place, of course, last month. And there was then curfew here in Phoenix. So we were in lockdown. People were out protesting. Curfew was then in place. So you had to be in between 8 p.m. and 5 a.m. And it was during this time that my absolute rogue landlord went completely off the rails because we, very long story short, refused him entry to the house. He just kept turning up. And we said to him, you can't come in. This really angered him. he's a very, very genuinely unstable person. And it escalated and escalated and escalated till he was just like threatening us in all manner. And then got his lawyer to send a letter saying that we'd attacked him. And it was just horrendous. We hadn't touched him clearly, but we'd attacked him. And then we were phoning him up and threatening his family. Just crackers. But he said, I need to let you know, I'm letting you know now via my lawyer that I carry a weapon. And if I see you again, I will use deadly force against you. So I was in my house with my 2 children going, wait a minute, this guy who has a key to my house has just said if he sees us again, he's going to shoot us. And this is off the back of weeks of increasingly unstable behaviour. And so I then thought, I need to get my children out of here now. And I phoned a friend and said, please, can you just come and take them now? And he just drove off with them. And I was all the time looking up the road thinking, if this guy turns up, what if my children never see their parents again? That was a real visceral feeling I had that they may never see us again. I was terrified. The police obviously came, phoned the police. They were incredible. The whole time the police were there, I was thinking, if I wasn't white, would they have believed me? Because there was so much going on at the time, because I said this man threatened to kill us. But I'm a middle-aged white woman. What if they hadn't believed me? And I thought, I've never been this scared in my life. I'd never actually been scared for my life before. I really hope no one listening to this ever has been. And I just thought, if on top of all of that, I hadn't been believed, I don't know how I would have coped, because I was genuinely so frightened. And the police escorted us as we packed and got out of the house, and then escorted us when we went back to like pack all our stuff up, because obviously our house was full of all our furniture and everything. But there was a time when I was stood in my closet and looking at my clothes going, what do I take? I don't know what do I take? What do you take when you're fleeing your house? I don't know. I've not been in this position before. And then I remembered the lockdown. I remembered COVID, and I remembered the protests and the curfew, and just thought, it's too much. There is too much going on. The world felt like it was on fire. And I just, at that point, I just thought, I can't process all this different information. You know, you drive along and there were posters and banners everywhere, and we wanted to go to my friend's house to print something off because we had to go and get a restraining order against this man. And we were like, we can't go and get their printer because it's now gone 8 o'clock and we're not allowed to leave the house. And it was completely overwhelming. So we did what any normal family would do and rented an RV and drove out into the middle of the desert, which felt completely the right thing to do. We did a Walter White styling. We were like, if we cook meth, we'll make enough money. We need never go back. But no, we drove out into the middle of the desert and just sat. I know I was up at 3 a.m. because obviously my brain was on fire, but I just sat and watched the sunrise over the desert and just thought, yeah, okay, I can do it. I can handle this. I can get through it. It's going to be all right. But I think literally getting the hell out of Dodge was the best thing to do. And we're so lucky. We've made the most amazing friends in a short year. We're so lucky we've got the financial resource that we could rent another house. You know, we had to leave that house because he was threatening to kill us. We lost a month's rent. Imagine if we'd not been able to do that. I mean, it's not been easy. We're not rolling in cash, but we were able to do that. And it's for those things that, you know, it's hard, isn't it, when people say to, oh, be thankful, be grateful. And you think, things are really difficult. I don't want to be grateful. I just want to have a moment of going, ah. But actually, there are the moments where you just stop and go, okay, how amazing I've got a supportive husband. How amazing our children are safe. How amazing, yeah, we've got the money that we could afford to lose a month's rent without being destitute. So, yeah, it's been quite tiring.
I bet. But as you were talking there, you know, the other thing you had on your side was that you were not automatically discriminated against because of the colour of your skin. You had white privilege. You were able to get out of there. Yeah. You did have police protection. You were believed, as you said. It really brings it home, doesn't it? I think something like that, when you explain that whole set of circumstances, but then you were one level up the scale from so many people who wouldn't have had that.
And that was not lost on me. And that I thought about that so many times over that couple of weeks. I talked about it on the podcast. And I think some people who have had a problem with understanding white privilege, who said, oh, I'm not privileged, I've worked really hard and I don't have a lot of money. And how can you say I'm privileged? Because you've never been asked to leave a store because of the colour of your skin, because you've never been refused service somewhere because of the colour of your skin, which virtually every single black person I know has experienced at least once in their life. you've never had the police turn up and go, what did you do to anger this man? Why is he threatening? What have you done to him? That was never the case. It was like, we're here, we're okay, we'll protect you, we'll stay with you till you can get out. If they hadn't done that, I don't know what I would have done, because it was completely terrifying. And yeah, that was absolutely not lost on me.
Now, I also know, though, from listening to your podcast and seeing you out and about doing various things and on your Twitter feed and everything else, that you are a remarkably positive woman, despite all of this crap that keeps happening to you. So I want to know, what are your tips to stay positive, to bring yourself back? Because you have to keep doing it. And you still, honestly say on the podcast, Arizona is home, Phoenix is home. You want to be there. You don't, even though there's been all this, and I would encourage everybody to go and listen to the podcast, because it's enthralling, if nothing, it's just, a fabulous listen. But how do you keep coming back? How do you keep yourself so positive?
I'm not going to lie and say there aren't times when I feel completely down. Of course there are. And I'm not going to lie and say there are times I'm not like a ball of anxiety because of things that have happened. And there are some times I can't see the wood for the trees. And that for me is when I feel completely paralyzed, is when I can't see a way out. And I'm not afraid of a difficult path. I'm not afraid of the road less traveled. But if I can't see the destination, that's when I really do struggle. But those moments do pass. And I think that's what I always remember. No feeling is final. And there's that great quote, isn't there, at the end of the film Jojo Rabbit, and I forget the name of the poet now, which is really frustrating, but menopause, so give me a break. The words just go. But there is that great thing that, let everything happen to you, beauty and terror. Just keep going. No feeling is final. And I've learned that when I do feel scared or frustrated or anxious or attacked, to sit with that feeling, because I think we're so conditioned that we don't want people to feel scared, and we don't want people to feel alone, and we don't want people to grieve, or all of these things, and we just try and cheer them up. We try and make them feel better all the time, because of course as humans we want other people to feel content and happy and safe. But those feelings are as valid as the feelings of joy and happiness and security, because they're just a bunch of feelings. And sitting with a feeling is something that's really hard to do. But boy, have I had the chance to do that over this year. And it was like when my mum, we'd been here 2 weeks and changed our entire lives, and we were still in that complete sort of firestorm of the first few weeks of arriving. And my mum sent me a WhatsApp. My mum in Australia sent me a WhatsApp message saying, do not watch with the children. And I thought she was going to say that she's coming over, and it was a big surprise. Unfortunately not. She told me she'd been diagnosed with lung cancer. And that was a massive blow that I just felt in shock, clearly. And a long story short is that she was having a big operation to take the tumour out. She'd left my stepdad a year before. She was living completely alone on a different side of Australia. She'd lived in Sydney for 25 years. She'd moved to Perth on her own. She was living in a flat above a shop. And she had no one to look after her coming out of this operation. So despite the fact we just moved our entire family, of course I went. Of course. Got there on my own, completely jet-lagged, delirious, and waited in the hospital cafe for 7 hours for the surgeon to come and say what was going to happen next, and thinking I've got a couple of weeks of really caring for someone who's come out of major surgery. It's going to be really hard. But, she's my mum. And unfortunately, the surgeon then came and said, it's not as we thought. We haven't been able to take the tumour out. It's spread a lot more. She's only got a few months to live. And I was, on my own in a hospital cafe, 10,000 miles from my family, and just overwhelming. And I remember being in shock, and I remember me telling her, because she hadn't won. She said, oh, don't tell me, let my daughter tell me when we come out of surgery. So I had to tell her. And it's funny, they wheeled her in and she just looked at me and went, they didn't get it, did they? And I said, no. And we were just in shock. And I drove back to her flat. She was in hospital for one night only, because they hadn't done a major op, of course, because they'd just gone in and had a look and gone, oh, yikes, we can't do anything. So we went back to her flat, And the next few days after she came home, we were just sitting around that flat and in shock, waiting for the oncologist to ring, because he said, oh, we'll do some palliative treatment, get some pain relief for you because you haven't got long. And I just went for a walk, and it just hit me. It was that moment of just resting with that feeling and allowing myself to feel grief and shock and fear. And then I just went for a walk and looked out over the Indian Ocean and went, bloody hell, look at this place. It is amazing. Perth is such a beautiful city. The whole of Western Australia is overwhelmingly beautiful. And I just went, oh my God, I'm so lucky. Look at this place. I'm here. We all face devastating, terrible things in our lives. All of us. Our parents die. Our loved ones die. We're cheated on, we're robbed, we're all these things. It happens to all of us. But bloody hell, it's happening to me in Western Australia, and it's stunning. Wow, I'm so lucky. And it's just taking a moment, allowing yourself, I think, to sit with those feelings, and then just taking stock of where you are. And that's when I think it's impossible not to feel positive, when you realise shit happens to all of us all the time. We're not special. When terrible things happen, and just go, yeah, it's happened, and look around you. And I then made the decision, we're not living, we're in her flat. I was drinking too much whiskey. She was probably eating too much chocolate. We were sat there together, and I went, this isn't living, we're not alive. And I called the doctor and said, can I take her away? And they were like, yep. So I went and rented an RV. There's a theme here with me and RVs, right? And drove up the coast, and we just went on a crazy Terminal Thelma and Louise road trip, which is, I'm so, so, so glad we did. But it was magic and amazing. And I think about that trip every day. And it's looking around you, I think, taking stock, knowing they're just feelings that you're feeling, and then looking around you and seeing all the doors that are open and all the opportunities you can take. And just doing it, because we have got one life, and just squeeze every last drop out of it that you can, because it's ace.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, follow, and share it. Also, giving a 5-star review really helps get the word out. You'll find the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you can get my book, Magnificent Midlife, Transform Your Middle Years, Menopause and Beyond. Make the very best of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.